Number 7. Leticia Astacio. In November of 2019, former Rochester City Court Judge Leticia Astacio was sentenced to 180 days in jail for violating the terms of her probation. Astacio's legal troubles had started with a DWI in February of 2016, which resulted in a crash on Interstate 490 near Mount Read Boulevard in the state of New York. No one was hurt, but the front of her car was damaged and both tires on the driver's side were flat. She was sentenced to a 1-year conditional discharge, the terms of which involved no alcohol consumption and an ignition interlock device installed on her car. She violated the terms of her probation that same year by attempting to drive while intoxicated and was placed in an alcohol treatment program. Her highly publicized case would see Astacio attempt to circumvent the interlock on her car on multiple occasions, and there were several reports indicating that she continued abusing alcohol. The repeated violations of her probation conditions resulted in Astacio being sentenced to 60 days in jail in 2017. She was ultimately removed from her duties due to the gravity and impact of her behavior. In late October of 2019, Astacio again appeared in court, claiming that she'd intentionally stopped going to probation meetings so that she could get in front of a judge and argued that the sentence she was serving was illegal. Ontario County Court Judge Lisa Toole told Astacio that her actions reflected she did what she wanted whenever she wanted, which Toole stated she wouldn't tolerate as she handed her the 6-month sentence. Number 6. Teresa Brennan. In January of 2020, disgraced Livingston County Judge Teresa Brennan was sentenced to 6 months in jail, an additional 18 months of probation and 200 hours of community service. Some of those in attendance clapped, with the courtroom echoing chants of "Power to the people," and one spectator reportedly shouting, "Welcome to your nightmare," following the announcement of the sentence. A few years prior, she'd been charged with perjury, tampering with evidence, and misconduct in office, all of which are felonies. Most of the legal turbulence surrounding Brennan arose from the murder trial of Jerome Kowalski. He'd been convicted of killing his brother Richard and his wife Brenda, who'd been found dead at their Osceola Township home in May of 2008. Brennan had had an affair with Michigan State Police investigator Sean Furlong, a lead witness for the prosecution. She failed to disclose the relationship, which was ultimately deemed gross misconduct. And in light of the scandal, Kowalski's conviction was vacated, prompting a retrial. During her consequent divorce case, Brennan committed perjury by lying about a cell phone that was a marital asset and tried to delete evidence from it. She was removed from the bench by the Michigan Supreme Court in June of 2019, and her license was later suspended. Brennan entered a plea agreement in which the other charges were dropped in favor of her pleading guilty to perjury. In court, Brennan spoke about the shame and remorse she'd felt throughout the legal proceedings and concluded with a plea for mercy. Perjury carried a maximum jail term of 15 years, but as per the agreement, her sentence was far lighter. Number 5. Tracy Hunter. Former Hamilton County Juvenile Court Judge Tracy Hunter had to be dragged out of the courtroom at her 2019 sentence execution hearing as she went completely limp when her 6-month jail sentence was pronounced. The legal matter dated back to her 2014 conviction for unlawful interest in a public contract. Hunter's brother Stephen was an employee at the juvenile court. In 2013, he'd hit an offender during an arrest and was in the process of getting fired. It was alleged that Hunter had passed confidential documents to Stephen in hopes that it would help him keep his position. The former Ohio judge considered the charges unrighteous and unlawful, arguing that she hadn't helped secure employment for her brother, who'd worked for the court for 7 years before she became a judge. Protesters claimed Hunter was being discriminated against because of her race and prominence as the first ever African American elected to Hamilton County's juvenile court. In spite of numerous appeals and efforts to have her conviction overturned, the sentence was upheld and Hunter was sent to jail. Number 4. Thomas J. Maloney. Throughout the years, multiple media outlets have named Thomas J. Maloney as the worst judge in history. He was brought down as part of Operation Greylord, a joint effort by multiple agencies including the FBI, the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS, and the Internal Affairs Division of the Chicago Police Department. The operation targeted corruption in the judiciary system of Cook County, Illinois, a scandal in which Maloney became the most prominent figure. Maloney was a boxer in his youth before becoming a lawyer in the early 1950s. He established underworld connections and even secured payment to a judge for a murder acquittal. The Illinois Supreme Court named him a judge in 1977, and he quickly established a reputation as a man who could be bribed regardless of the case's gravity. The Chicago Tribune would describe him as the first and only Cook County judge to have rigged murder cases for cash. For several years, he'd managed to maintain a public image of unwavering toughness as a judge, while consistently receiving bribes and even treating defendants harshly if they didn't pay him. As Operation Greylord slowly gathered evidence against him, Maloney was indicted in 1991, much to the surprise of everyone in Cook County. Some of his most egregious rulings included the acquittal of hitman Lenny Chow and other members of the On Leong Mafia in a murder case dating back to 1981, just 4 years after he'd taken the bench. In exchange for a bribe of roughly $5,000, Maloney acquitted Owen Jones of felony murder for beating a man to death with a pipe during a burglary. He was instead sentenced to voluntary manslaughter, which cut his sentence down to 9 years instead of 20 for murder. Maloney was also on the verge of interfering in a case involving 2 members of the El Rucan street gang, accused of a double homicide, but eventually pulled out after discussing bribery terms with one of the gang's generals. In some cases, bailiff Lucius Robinson, who later testified against him, had acted as the bagman for Maloney and was later replaced by the judge's friend and fellow lawyer Robert McGee, who also cooperated with the authorities. For his crimes, Maloney served 12 years in prison from 1994 to 2007. Number 3. Mark Ciavarella and Mark Conahan. The Kids for Cash incident of 2008 is one of the most prominent and publicized scandals involving judges to have occurred in recent years. Mark Ciavarella and Mark Conahan were judges at the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania. They were found guilty of accepting money in exchange for imposing unusually harsh adjudications on youths in order to increase the occupancy of for-profit juvenile detention centers. Conahan used his position to stop funding towards the county's public detention facility and instead sent juvenile defendants to for-profit facilities that had been newly built. In exchange for kickbacks from those who owned and operated the facilities, he agreed to generate at least $1.3 million in annual receivables, which would be supported by the taxpayers. What this basically meant was that he, like Ciavarella, was illegally paid to send as many defendants to the facilities as quickly as he could without arousing suspicion. Lawyers from Philadelphia's non-profit Juvenile Law Center, whom several juveniles had sought for legal advice, found that hundreds of cases had been tried without the defendants receiving proper counsel. Ciavarella was alleged to have received $2.6 million in kickbacks from the same detention facilities. In return, he sentenced children to extended stays for minimal offenses such as trespassing in a vacant building, marking a principal on MySpace, or shoplifting DVDs from a Walmart. Thousands of youths were affected by the 2 judges' actions. In 2010, Conahan pleaded guilty to 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and was sentenced to 17.5 years in a federal prison. The following year, Ciavarella went to trial and was given a sentence of 28 years in a federal prison. Today's topic was requested by Instagram follower Redskins for Evs. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below, or follow us on Instagram and reach out to us there. Number 2. Samuel Kent. From 2003 to 2007, case manager Kathy McBroom suffered repeated abuse at the hands of her boss, Samuel B. Kent, a Texas federal judge in the Galveston division. A former high school athlete described as a larger-than-life figure, Kent wielded immense power in the city, referring to himself as the Lion King or the Emperor of Galveston. He took advantage of his position to have his way with McBroom during her employment, believing she'd be too intimidated to report him. In one incident on March the 23rd of 2007, he called her to his chambers and asked for a hug. She reluctantly accepted after telling him it was inappropriate. When the mother of three got close to him, the judge pulled her bra and blouse up, then started touching her inappropriately. He forced her head towards his crotch while explicitly telling her, as she struggled, what he wanted to do to her. The sound of footsteps outside the room interrupted them, and McBroom left the chambers crying. While working for Kent, she'd experienced 15 to 20 incidents of harassment, at least 5 of which involved inappropriate touching. The incident in 2007 prompted her to launch a formal complaint against Kent and request immediate transfer. The following year, Kent was indicted in federal court on 3 counts of abusive contact. He thus became the first federal judge to be charged with federal crimes of such nature. Also joining the case against him was testimony from Kent's former secretary, Donna Wilkerson, whom he'd pressed against the door and forcefully kissed on the mouth on her 5th day on the job. Similar and worse inappropriate behavior towards her continued for 7 years. Another charge leveled against Kent was obstruction of justice for lying to investigators about what he'd put the 2 employees through. Under an agreement, the other charges were dropped and he was sentenced to 33 months in prison for obstruction. President Barack Obama accepted his resignation on June the 30th of 2009. Number 1. Lance Mason. Lance Timothy Mason served as a judge on the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas and from 2007 to 2008 as a member of the Ohio Senate. Mason and his wife, Aisha Nee Fraser, became separated in March of 2014. In August of that same year, he was arrested and charged for brutally beating her while he was driving, and their 2 daughters were in the back seat. According to the police report, Mason punched Fraser 20 times with his fist, repeatedly smashed her head against the center console, and relentlessly struck, bit, and threatened her life after she'd exited the car.
911, Shaker Police, emergency.
Yes, my husband just beat me and threw me out the car. He has my 2 daughters in the car.
Where you at?
Van Aken Boulevard.
Yeah.
And like Avalon. He just threw me out the car. Orange Saturn View 2008. I'm afraid he's going to hurt my daughters.
Is he with you now, or did
No,
he drive off?
He drove off.
Which way on Van Aken?
He went going down towards the police station. He probably hit Chagrin.
On the day of his arrest, the authorities seized a small arsenal from the judge's home. It included shotguns, handguns, and semi-automatic rifles, as well as smoke grenades, a sword, a bulletproof vest, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. On August 13th, he pleaded guilty to domestic violence and attempted felonious assault. The Ohio Supreme Court suspended him from practicing law, and in mid-September, he submitted his resignation as a judge. He was ultimately sentenced to a prison term of 2 years and was released after 9 months. On November the 17th of 2018, in the driveway of a house owned by his sister, Mason once again attacked Fraser. He stabbed her repeatedly in front of their 2 children aged 8 and 11 and left her to die. Fraser eventually succumbed to her wounds. Responding officers arrived to the address in Shaker Heights, at which point Mason tried to flee in the victim's SUV. In doing so, he slammed into a police cruiser, injuring an officer. Body cam footage would then show him running back into the house, from where he was apprehended without incident. While sitting in handcuffs in front of the house, Mason was recorded saying, "I cannot believe I did this." He pled guilty to the murder and was sentenced to life in prison, with the chance of parole after 35 years, meaning he'd be in his late 80s if released. Thanks for watching. If you had to choose between being a judge, a lawyer, or politician, which would you choose? Let us know in the comments section below.